Hey folks, it's Rob Flux here with another Sunday session, and tonight is open mic night. That means it's your chance to ask me as many questions as you like and see if I can help you on your property development journey. Now, typically, we do open mic night on the first Sunday of every single month, and in order to do so, what I ask you to do is click on the link below, propdev.info/open-mic. Submit your question in advance. What that allows me to do is any homework that I need to in order to prepare for your particular question. That way, I don't look so silly on the day. Now, that said, we've got a ton of questions for today. So you're going to see what I can do to help you on your journey. First question comes from Rowan. Rowan asks, hi, Rob. Hope you're well. I'm based in Sydney. Can you please let me know what is the minimum amount of cash that I need, both cash and borrowing power, to start on the property development journey in Sydney? Also, do you recommend starting with a subdivision for a beginner? Thanks, Rowan. Rowan, fantastic question, mate. There's actually two hidden questions within there. One, what is my development strategy? And two, I guess, how much money do I actually need? So I'm going to break it down into the two sections. From a development strategy perspective, okay, there are lots of different development strategies out there, a ton of them. In fact, I'm going to say there's a good 30 or 40 different development strategies out there. Every single one of them works. They all make money. This is not a question of whether or not they make money. But there's only a couple of different development strategies out there where you can start small and then start to scale your projects and do a slightly larger version of the same project than on project number 2 and a slightly larger one on project number 3, and then learn from the lesson of the first project and apply that into the second one, and then learn from that lesson and apply that into the third. So the strategies that work that you can start small and scale. Firstly, subdivisions, one that you actually suggested. Okay, so you can start with a 1 into 2 land subdivision, selling it as land. You can then go on and do brand spanking new builds on those. You can do 1 into 4, 1 into 10, 1 into 20, build an entire street, an entire suburb, an entire city if you really want to, from a scaling perspective. So great one that you can start small and start to scale. Townhouses, you can start with a duplex, then a 4-pack, then a 6-pack. You can do 10, 20, 30 as you go. Again, very, very scalable. Or also apartments. You can do units on grade. You can do 2-story, 3-story, 5-story, and 20-story, etc. So those 3 elements. So 2 of them, I'm going to say the townhouses and the apartments, I'm going to group together and call multi-res. So you've got the multi-res path and you've got the subdivision path. Both of them are going to get you where you want to go by starting small and scaling. Now, which one is for you? Well, that really comes down to a thing that I call money rules. And the money rules are simple things. And I'm not going to go through all of them now, but they're simple things that you want to start to ask yourself. So how long can I wait for payday, for example? So if you can't wait 2 years for a townhouse project to run, then starting with a townhouse project or starting with a duplex or something like that is probably not the deal for you. If you need something to be in and out in 12 months, for example, then you may want to start with a land subdivision where you can be in and out in 9 months, okay? Now, that's just one of many, many of my money questions that I ask, but that is one to say, are both of them ruled in or out based on the answers that you actually get to them? Now, what you do is you answer all those money rule questions, and then what is left over is the most likely outcome for you, okay? And the answer is going to be very different for everyone. So firstly, would I recommend doing subdivisions? Yes, but it's not the only path, and I don't know if it's the path for you, but certainly worth investigating, mate. So that's the first part. Second part, okay? How much cash do I need, both from a cash perspective and borrowing power? Mate, that is a fantastic question. Now, the reason why I started with talking about the strategy first is that's a super important part in the process, okay? And this is where a lot of people get it wrong, is they usually choose an area first and then try to force their strategy in. I want you to choose your strategy and I want you to choose your deal size. Then I want you to start to analyze all the suburbs around and go, does my particular deal type that I'm trying to do, does it make sense in this particular suburb? And what you're going to find, there's many, many suburbs where it doesn't make sense and there's many suburbs where it does make sense, but you've got to do the homework to find it. Now, why is that important? Because what you are going to do is then going to determine where does that actually start to make sense. Now, when you know where it's going to make sense, that's going to tell you how much you need in order to get into the deal. So you can find suburbs that are going to be very, very cheap to get into and going to be profitable. You can also find suburbs that are very, very expensive. So how much do you need is very subjective, mate. So you could be in very cheap suburbs, say a 500K purchase price on the outer edges of the city and still be able to do some deals, or you might be right in the hustle and bustle, in the inner rings, and you might be spending $3, $4, $5 million in order to purchase. Now you're still doing the exact same strategy. So where you do it is going to greatly dictate the price. Now that said, you've gone through a process, you've chosen your development strategy, you've chosen the area based on some suburb selection criteria, and you now have a purchase price that you believe is going to work in your particular area. Now, I'm just going to make up an arbitrary number, say it's $1 million purchase price, but as I said, there could be fairly big range. Now, in order to now execute that deal, there are now 3 lots of cash that you actually need. There's a deposit to purchase, there is the serviceability to fund the debt, and there is the liquid cash to run the deal, okay? Now, you need to actually do that at 3 different stages. So firstly, acquisition stage, when you first purchase the property, you're going to acquire that, get all your development approvals in place and the like. Then the second stage, the construction phase. Now, depending upon the size of the deal, you may need to refinance out the acquisition stage. Now, when you're doing your first deal or two, that might not be required, but as you start to scale your deals, you'll potentially have a different lender for your construction phase than you will for the acquisition phase. And then lastly, the third stage is any stock that you intend to keep at the end, okay? So 3 different lots of cash and 3 different stages that you're actually going to need it. Now, knowing that that's the case, on that $1 million purchase, for example, typical acquisition would be a 20% deposit, would be $200K worth of deposit that you would need, about $800K worth of serviceability, and then whatever liquid cash you need to actually run the deal. Now, depending upon what you're trying to do, if you're trying to do a small land subdivision, it might be as little as $100,000 to $120,000 that you might be able to get away with. If it's a duplex or apartment complex, a duplex or a townhouse, it might be that you want to start at that 120 and go all the way up to say 180 from a liquid cash to run the deal type perspective. So they're the costs that you need in order to fund things like your town planner and your civil engineer and your architect and that sort of thing in order to get your plans and permits approved and get the deal actually to the point of construction. Now, all of that said, in a lot of instances, you don't got the cash, which is why you're asking the question. And so there are antidotes to how do I solve those problems when you don't have them. So there are 7 no or low money down strategies that I teach that will help you to either defer or sometimes avoid a couple of costs in the projects and sometimes kick the can down the road with regards to doing those. So I'll give you just one example as evidence of what I'm trying to achieve. So rather than acquiring the property and paying cash up front, what if you instead said to the vendor, look, this project's going to take me 12 months to run. I'm going to pay 12 months worth of interest. Instead of me giving that to the bank, would you be interested in me paying you at the end of the deal for everything, including the interest? So in that instance, a 12-month deal, we're currently at 6.5% interest rates. That's another $65,000 you could be paying for that $1 million property. So you could say to the vendor, I'll give you $1 million today or $1,065,000 in 12 months' time. Now, if you're not going to settle for it for 12 months' time, that also means that you're not going to be paying for land tax and you're also not going to be paying for rates in that 12 months. So there's probably another 10K and another 15K you can then hand back at the end of the 12 months. So effectively, you've got 12 months worth of holding costs that you've avoided, okay, because you settled a little later. So it's called delayed settlement with early access. And what that does is it allows you to control the property, actually get in and run the deal, kick the can down the road. You're going to pay a little bit more for the property, but it's not costing you more in the deal because all you've done is give them, you're doing a clawback. I'm not paying the interest to the bank. I'm going to give that to him at the end. I'm not going to pay the land tax. I'm going to give that to him at the end. So he gets more for his property and you get a cash flow advantage, and you didn't need to come up with the deposit and the serviceability up front. The only thing you really needed is liquid cash. Now, that instance, that's just one of the 7 strategies that we teach in order to, overcome those obstacles with regards to those three elements. So in short, mate, it all can be done. Go and learn your no and low money down strategies. That's going to give you some insights into how that. Go and choose your development strategy. Make sure you turn up to one of our meetups. Have some chats to some people that are actually out there doing it. And mate, I look forward to seeing you on your journey. Hope that helps. Next question comes from Nanita. Nanita says, what's the time frame to build for a residential property development for a detached dwelling and the cost? Okay, that's a very broad question, okay? So typically what we're finding, build costs have blown out, build timelines, I should say, have blown out in the last couple of years since COVID, and it doesn't look like they're coming back anytime soon. There's no particular reason. So during COVID, there was a lot of logistical supply chain issues that caused timelines to blow out. So what was previously a 6 or a 9 month construct is now turning into 9 and 12 months. And what I'm seeing as common nowadays is the builder is just defaulting to a 12-month contract. Now, all of those logistical supply chain issues have now actually been resolved, but because it's been a couple of years of builders getting away with 12-month contracts, it's now deemed to be the default. So I think it's going to take a while to claw that back. Plus, there are so few builders out there that the builders are being picky and choosy with regards to the deals they take on. And for that reason, they're only going to do ones where they know that they're going to have a whole bunch of slack in the system, so they don't get burnt like they did during the COVID period. So from a timeline perspective, I would allow at least 12 months from a construction perspective, plus whatever pre-work you need to do in order to get to the point of construction. So whatever development approvals or plans and permits that you need in order to get the approval in the first place, that could take you a good couple of months just to do that as well. Get your architect designs, etc. Hope that helps. Next question comes from Daniel. Daniel says, hi, Rob, can you talk about modular construction in Australia? I've approached some factories in China and we're shown the projects that they've done, such as townhouses, apartments, student accommodation, etc. Modular construction is quick and cost effective. Obviously, as a developer, we need to deal with the certification during the build. Another concern is the people's perception of modular during building quality-wise. This may affect the sale price and sale time. Daniel, mate, this is a really, really interesting thing. In Australia, modular is new, and I've very, very carefully qualified that. But if you go and look at places like Europe, they've been doing modular construction for a good 40 or 50 years. So the technology is very, very, very well advanced. It's not that it's nothing new, it's just new in Australia. And we've been very, very late adopters of this technology. Now, the issues and challenges that you've rightly pointed out, I guess the potential for the build quality and also the perceived, quality, whether the build quality is actually there or not, maybe potentially impacting price. But there's actually a few other challenges as well. And I want to map this out because this is something that as an industry, we actually need to solve, okay? Firstly, our entire financial system is based on the fact that we're going to pay in installment payments based on materials being physically installed on site. And so for that perspective, especially over a larger timeline, we just said 9 to 12 months in order to build. That means staggered payments over a long period of time. Now, with modular construction, it's all built in a factory and it's all built very, very quickly in the factory. And on site, there is nothing there. And then all of a sudden, there's everything there. So there's no real, payments, installments per se from that side of things. Plus, because it's made in a factory, the financier will typically say, well, I need a quantity surveyor to go out and actually see that you've got the right amount of concrete and the right amount of steel and the right amount of, wood in place and that sort of thing. Now, they can't get to do that unless they go and physically inspect that in a factory. So the finance industry themselves need to get their head around changing how we fund deals. That's the first part. And until they do that, it's going to make it very, very difficult from a builder to actually want to take that on, because otherwise the builder has to fund the whole lot. And a lot of builders just aren't up to, from a technology perspective, they're not really wanting to change their old ways. They're very set in their ways. So as a developer, it then comes back to us to say, well, if the builder's not ready for this and the funder's not, willing to take this on, at the moment, the real problem is we need to cash flow that ourselves. We need to actually go to the factory, pay the factory the money, and then the factory will then deliver it, and then we get the financier to repay us. But because the actual construction on-site component is so short, it gets to the point we go, well, why do we actually need the financier at all in that process if we're going to cash flow it? So the whole finance industry needs to take a very strong look at this, because either we can only do it with our own cash, in which case we don't need the financiers, or the financiers start to look at things differently. So that's probably the biggest challenge that I see. The next challenge is the perception on build quality. Now, I say perception, and clearly there's always going to be budget versions of this, and there's also going to be high-end versions of this. But because it's built in a factory with a roof on and walls and that sort of thing in very clean, pristine conditions. It's not like you're out in the weather and people building things in the sun when it's raining and all sorts of things like that. The ability to actually get a better quality finish, where you've got machines that can actually line things up and jigs, and you are much more likely to have a better quality finish, where it's built in a factory and controlled environment, than you will be having it installed in the field. Now, there will always be, just some little cleanups and little retrofits and that sort of thing when you actually get to site, where maybe something isn't a perfect flush fit, but that was going to happen anyway. So, it's not really changing things a hell of a lot. So it's really the perception of it. Now, the perception of it really comes down to, well, do people even know that it was modular in the first place? If they physically turned up and saw the finished product, they probably wouldn't know that it was constructed through using modular technology. The only way that they would actually know is if you sold it to them off the plan and 3 weeks later it was suddenly built, or if during the sales process they were there whilst the construction was actually happening. But once you actually have a finished product, they're pretty much indistinguishable from one that was actually custom made on site in situations. So from that perspective, will it impact sales? Plausibly, but I think that once we actually get to the point where people can actually see and feel the build quality and actually understand what the finished product looks like, I think that they're going to compare one versus next door, and they're going to go, you know what, it actually isn't that big a deal. So anyway, Daniel, I hope that helps. Next question comes from Julie. Julie says, what do you think the CFMEU has had? What do you think is the impact that the CFMEU has had on, and does that have any impact on construction costs? Any insights into this and the recent media reports into the CFMEU impacting government response on construction costs would be appreciated. Look, firstly, I don't know enough about that particular issue, but what I will do is I'll just talk very generically. In the media, in the recent times, the CFMEU has been, brought to task for potential corruption inside the union ranks. Now, I say potential because I have no visibility as to whether or not it's real or not. What I would say is CFMEU and other unions, so not them alone, tend to play in the more high-end commercial space. So the apartment complexes, the high-rises, more the larger scale industrial or commercial type builds. You're not going to see them scale down and turn up onto sites where you're building a duplex or a single house or maybe a six-pack of townhouses, so to speak. So will it impact our end of the market? I'm going to say no. I don't think it's going to have any impact at all. But the accusations are that because there has actually been corruption, and I don't know the extent of what the corruption is, but the accusation is, well, there's a whole bunch of I guess, money that's changed hands that could have potentially, I guess, made the cost of the project a little bit cheaper if that didn't happen. But it was how do we? So the accusations are more along the lines of, hey, how do we make sure that the project actually still proceeds and things like that, and you don't slow down. So by not having all of that red tape in place, I think the government's going to have a long time to actually go and clean all of that up, to review that, come up with any recommendations, that sort of thing. I don't think you'll ever get the unions out of those larger projects. I think they actually have certainly have a place. In this particular instance, there's clearly some issues and challenges with regards to the organisational running of those. They're talking about putting a couple of those different branches from different states into administration and actually, I guess, dissolving their management team and having others run it. I think there is certainly a place because there are workers that need to actually be protected. But at the same time, it adds a level of, I guess, bureaucracy and challenges to those larger projects. So is there a potential impact? Yes. What will be the repercussions of that? I don't know. What is the timelines? I'm going to say it's going to take a good 2 to 3 years to wash that through the system before anyone actually has any view of it. I don't think the unions are actually going to go anywhere. I think all they're going to do is I guess, get rid of the current management team, put a new management team in place, and put some monitoring and a layer of bureaucracy over the top to make sure that everything is actually done appropriately. If anything, in the longer run, it's probably going to add costs because the governance that's going to sit around that is going to impact things. In the short term, I don't think it's going to have much impact at all, and it's certainly not going to impact us at our end of the world, being down the small scale developers. Next question comes from Justin. Justin says, hi, Rob. I'm soon to be tendering to builders for pricing a 3 townhouse project. Given past experience, I was wondering whether you had any suggestions or personal preferences regarding, and he's got 2 questions. 1, whether to include a form of contract inclusive of any particular conditions in the tender, or whether to leave it to the builders to quote against their preferred form of contract. Good question, mate. So there's many forms of contract, and I'll talk to that. Or 2, if including a contract in the tender, what are your thoughts regarding my own bespoke form, say based on the AS 4000 versus the HIA or Master Builders contract? So let me first talk, I guess, at a very high level, Justin, so everyone understands what we're talking about here. There are multiple different kinds of building contracts that actually exist out there. So there are industry-based contracts. So the HIA, Housing Industry Association, and the Master Builders, the Master Builders Association, both of those have contracts, what they call standard form contracts. So those standard form contracts are, everybody is familiar with them. They're, I guess, written in a very regular and consistent way. And so once your lawyer has reviewed one of those one time, they're pretty much the same thing over and over and over. And it's really just looking at the variables and what's actually been changed. And so it's very quick and easy to review. Okay. So that's the plus side of things and why the industry has standardized it. The negative side of things is both the HIA and Master Builders are very one-sided. They're in favor of the builder, and they're not very much in favor of the vendor or the developer in that particular instance. So you do need to have some standards changed if you're going to use a HIA or Master Builders with regards to a whole bunch of special conditions that you want to put in there. Now, I'm not going to go into all of those. I've covered those on previous Sunday sessions many times, but as an example, I guess, defining the start date. The start date is not a very clear definition in either of those, so it's very ambiguous. So when does the clock actually start ticking? So if you don't know when the clock starts ticking, how do you know that the contract has run out or expired and you actually get to the point of liquidated damages? Very sneaky, very tricky. Another one is there is no definition for inclement weather. So how much rain impacts a rain day? Now, 3 millimeters of rain when you're digging foundations is very different to 20 millimeters of rain when the roof is on. And so there's no real definition of some of these things. So there are certainly some special conditions if you're going to use a HIA or Master Builders that you would need to put together. And I would propose, if you're going out to tender, intending to use one of those contracts, that you put your proposed special conditions in that tender pack. That will make your world much, much cleaner, much, much simpler, and easier to actually come to. The last thing you want to do is have a builder respond, give you a really nice sharp price, then you lay the special conditions on them and they go, hang on, that's not what we agreed, right? So be upfront, give it to them upfront. Now, that said, they're the industry association ones, but there are also the Australian standards contracts. Now, you've mentioned one called the AS 4000, but there's a couple of other ones out there as well. And again, they are a standard form contract, and you'll see those used pretty much all the time once you get to the larger, more commercial projects. But when you're doing your smaller projects, your duplexes and a 4-pack of townhouses, that sort of thing, those builders are not so familiar with them. And so you've got the challenge. So whilst they're more evenly balanced for both sides, the challenge is that the builder won't be familiar with them. And so you've got to look at the size of your project and go, based on the size of my project, do I want to make it hard for my builder to want to respond to this tender? Or do I want to make it easy and give them, I guess, the variations that I want? So if you're doing a small scale project, I would be sticking with the HIA master builders, but give them the special conditions that you want varied as part of the tender pack. As you start to scale, then yes, I would be looking at something like the AS 4000. But if you're going to, as you said, make that a bespoke form, then so that it's easy and fair for them, make sure that you've actually declared the bits that you've changed, again, via way of an addendum or a special condition that actually sit in there. Anyway, Justin, hope that helps, mate. Next question is from Grace. Grace says, how do I calculate a payment, please? If I were to lend a vendor finance to a development project, say 200K for 2 years, first year on 7% per annum and the second year on 10% per annum, will the money be received as principal and interest? So Grace, in this instance, you're not the developer by the sound of it. You're actually the vendor, and a developer is actually trying to buy it off you. They may not have the deposit, and so you're using vendor finance to help them with the deposit, which, by the way, is one of the 7 no and low money down deals, is vendor finance, where the vendor actually helps out by helping become effectively the bank. In this instance, Grace is trying to work out what they should charge and how they should actually charge it. So Grace, I'm going to try and do this from 2 different hats, okay? So one, the hat of the developer, and one, the hat of you being the vendor in the first place. Now, if the developer is asking for vendor finance because they're short on the deposit, then chances are that means that they're short on liquid cash in order to actually help you through that. So if you're asking for a monthly principal and interest payment, you might have a level of comfort because you're getting a regular, consistent payment coming through. But if you actually think about what the developer is actually doing, they've borrowed that 200K off of you, and then they're drip feeding that same 200K back to you. So for example, I'm just going to do easy math. You said 200K, and let's just say 10%. That means that there would be $20,000 worth of interest that they would be giving back to you in installments over in that 12-month period. So now I can't do the math, but just say 1,200 every single month, for example. Okay, as an example. Now that means that he doesn't have 200,000 anymore. He's actually got 1,998 because he's had to cash flow you that 2K. So the ability for that developer to use all of that 200K has now been eroded because he's had to put some of that money aside in order to pay you. So it can be done, but it's not necessarily in the best interests of the project because now he's going to have to borrow more money from more places. Just know that that's the case, okay? So, but that might make you have a level of comfort that you're getting paid along the way. Now, with regards to the how do I do the calculation, that was your question. You can actually get a pretty much a mortgage calculator from any of the finance brokers that sit out there. put in the 200K, put the interest rate, say the period of time, and it would actually calculate that principal and interest payment for you. So it's easy for you to actually calculate that out. I'm not going to do the math on that for you today, but just go to pretty much any, whether it be Mortgage Choice, whether it be Aussie Home Loans, anyone like that, they'll all have mortgage calculators you can actually download, and you'll be able to calculate that out. But my guidance, Grace, would be, firstly, make sure that you've got the appropriate securities and protections in place. And secondly, if you can afford to wait, capitalize the interest at the tail end, and you might be able to get a little bit better than the 7% and 10% that they've mentioned here, because by capitalizing at the end, it improves the cash flow of the developer, which means he's paying for it out of the profits of the finished product, and that means he doesn't have to cash flow it today to you. So you might actually get more for the deal by capitalizing it to the end. Next question. Justin says, I have a question about depreciation schedules and dual key properties. I purchased a property that is dual key, so it has a wall down the middle and sort of like a duplex with multiple tenants, but the building is on one title. That's kind of what a dual key is, mate. I've been informed by my accountant that in order to do this, I need a depreciation schedule, but I'm not sure whether or not I need one depreciation schedule or two depreciation schedules, given that it's two sets of keys. Justin, fantastic question, mate. In this particular instance, I'm not an accountant, so this is just my lay opinion, but it is one title that you actually have. So it is also one building that you have. And whilst you have two tenancies in there, my lay opinion would be, I think there would only be one set of depreciation schedules in order to do that. Now, your accountant is the one who should be able to answer that for you. The fact that your accountant doesn't know that is probably a fair indication that you might want to be looking for another accountant. But depreciation schedules, if you're an annual member, just so you know, if you go into our discount supply program, we've got tons of discounts that we get from all the way around the country because of our bulk purchasing power. But as an annual member, if you want discounts on your depreciation schedules, go into the members only portal and have a look. And we've got a whole bunch of discounts where you can actually claim that. Not knowing where you're located, we've got a couple of companies that provide those. So go check it out. Next one comes from Joey. Joey says, hi everyone. I have never subdivided before, but I'd like to learn. The mortgage broker said that banks usually don't lend money if you plan on selling vacant blocks of land, and there needs to be plans for houses attached, i.e. house and land packages. Is this true? I would have thought there are plenty of people selling vacant blocks of land after a subdivision. Thank you very much. Joey, they're actually partially correct here, mate. And so sometimes when you've got half information, it can be a little bit misleading. So the first part to this is you're clearly going to a mortgage broker who's never dealt with development sites before. And so you might want to get a better mortgage broker. That's the first part. The second part is it's clear that you're trying to do this with residential lending. And the challenge that you've got with the residential lending is twofold. The fact that you're trying to sell it as land is the secondary problem. The primary problem is that you're trying to convince that lender that you're trying to service the project over a 20 or 30 year period, but then you're very, very quickly going to knock down the house, carve up the property and sell it very, very fast. Residential lenders don't like that approach, okay? And that's one of the reasons why they make it difficult because of the fact that to have the land at the end. They don't want to hold land as security, okay? Now, the reason for that is land does not generate rent. They equally don't want you to cash in and sell everything up in a super fast period of time. So what you're really wanting to be doing, Joey, is you're wanting to be doing dealing with a lender who specializes in development sites, okay? And now there are many, many ones out there, but it's not your standard everyday residential lender. Now, they may give you a residential bank that will actually be a residential loan, but they'll be development friendly, okay? But if you go to a standard everyday broker, they won't understand who are development friendly, okay? So chances are probably engaging with the wrong mortgage broker, go find a better broker who specializes in that development style lending. They will be able to find you someone who does this, but even then you will start to have a couple of challenges. But you don't have to have the plans and permits for your house unless you're in Victoria. Victoria is the one exception to all of that because of their subdivision rules down there. But many people are selling vacant land all the time and doing that through residential lending. Many more people are doing that using more commercial style lending with more development friendly lenders. And so, yes, mate, it can be done. You just got to shop around a little bit harder. Okay, next question. Hope that helps anyway. Next question is for Tom. Tom says, probably a basic question, but how do you go about, getting a rough build price? I'm looking at building a 3-story, 2-bedroom bath dwelling at the rear with an internal area of about 180 square meters. Can you trust the online cost calculators through the different quantity surveyors? Now, he's named one. I'm not going to name that one, but there's a couple of them out there that do this. So firstly, Tom, anything that you get from a quantity surveyor that's published online is going to be very conservative because they don't know the kind of project that you're doing. They don't know where you're doing it. They don't know the issues and challenges. So there's always going to be a layer of fat built into those online calculators. Now, is it 5%? Is it 10%? I don't know. I've got a fair view, but I'm not going to put it on public record on what that actually looks like. My encouragement to you, mate, is actually go back and watch Sunday session, which actually went out just last week. We were talking to Mitchell Brantman, who is a quantity surveyor who looks after pretty much all of the East Coast. So they're in Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne. And they were talking about the cost of construction there and how do you actually go about it. The reality is that it is very, very subjective based on where you're actually doing the project itself and also the build quality. So it's a combination of the size, combination of the location, and also the build quality they're actually trying to do. So when you actually ask just a very, very generic question, how much is the dollar per square meter, it's very difficult to do. But if you go to a quantity surveyor, they have reviewed thousands and thousands and thousands of build contracts in thousands of different areas by thousands of different builders. And so they're going to be well informed to actually give you the insights at a much more specific layer. So if you are in a very specific suburb, you can say in this particular suburb, they'll know the builders that operate in that area. They know the build rates that those particular builders are actually quoting on. And so they'll be able to give you a much more detailed quality range. Now, it will cost you in order to get that assessment, okay? But very, very worthwhile. And also the quantity surveyor can help you when you actually go out to tender to actually make sure that you're actually doing things and getting a good builder on at a good price. Plus they can do with a few things like value engineering, so they can look at the design that you've got and go, hey, here's some opportunities to remove some costs just because of the way you've got your design done, etc. So very, very worthwhile. Don't be penny wise and pound poor. Spend the money, go and actually get the professional advice. And in doing so, I can almost guarantee you it's going to save you thousands and thousands of dollars in running your project. Next one comes from Ravi. So I hope that helps anyway, mate. Comes from Ravi. Ravi says, quick question for connecting to a stormwater pit at the corner of a neighbouring block. Do I need an easement to be legally registered or can an agreement by email suffice in New South Wales? Thank you very much. Ravi, mate, that's a fantastic question. And this is one of those things where it really depends. And I hate doing that it depends part. But there are many, many utility providers who look after stormwater in all the different jurisdictions all the way around the country. So sometimes it is council, sometimes it is an external government-based entity, etc. And so the rules will change from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, okay? Now, in New South Wales, typically you're going to find that if you want to run a stormwater pipe through someone else's yard, you will need an easement over that particular property, typically, okay? But not always, okay? If you are in other states, it is the opposite. You may not require that easement to be in place, and the not having an easement would be the norm, and having an easement would be the exception. So it does change from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. The best thing that I can suggest that you do is talk to a town planner and also a civil engineer. So town planner is going to tell you what legislation is going to apply in the place, and the civil engineer is going to tell you what utility provider you're actually dealing with and what their default terms are when they're looking at processes like this. So hope that helps. Next question. I think it's Sanaith. Sanaith, this is a massive question. As a matter of fact, it's probably going to take me about 5 minutes just to read the question. So I'm just going to, abbreviate this for the interests of time. Sanaith says, for my first development project, I have an 809 square meter block purchased with an existing approved development approval for 5 townhouses that's valid until 2027. It's about 9 kilometres from the Brisbane CBD, around 70% of the property value still in the loan. So he's got a 30% loan to value ratio. He can't fund the project individually. He's saying a JV is hard option to find. JV is a hard option to find an interested developer/builder. So looking at private lending/finance seems to be my only options. So some questions. Question number 1. Man, the way you've written this is very hard to actually interpret. Number 1, is clearing of the existing mortgage a prerequisite to starting this project? Actually, Sanaith, that's where I said before, the 3 stages: acquisition, construction, and then refinance of any finished product at the end. Quite often for a project of this size, the construction lender will want to pay out the acquisition lender. Yes, because the construction lender wants to have first mortgage. In order to have first mortgage, they don't want the initial lender in place. So they will pay out that loan and then roll that into the construction loan. That's very normal. That happens all the time, mate. Question number 2, a broker offered full financing of the project if the actually that question's a little bit hard to interpret, so I'm just going to ignore that one. Next question. Do regular banks finance these projects on the merits of the project, even considering it as a commercial project? The answer to that is yes. You can get this from a regular bank. You can go to the ANZ, Commonwealth Bank, Westpac, NAB, etc. They do these sorts of loans, but that goes through to their commercial lending division. Okay, so they're not looking at this as a residential loan. They're looking at this as a commercial loan, the same way all the other banks would actually be looking at it. Now, with a more traditional bank, okay, some of the big 4, you will get much cheaper interest rates, but the conditions that they put on you will be so onerous, it will actually be crippling to your project. So they will mandate that you must do pre-sales off the plan to sell the finished product before you actually start to construct. Now, selling off the plan is 1, time-consuming, 2, difficult, 3, not likely to get you the best price point, and 4, because of all of that, is going to add delays to the whole process, adding holding costs to your project. So you're going to be looking good from an interest rate perspective, but you're going to incur a whole bunch of costs with your holding costs and get less revenue because you're selling it off the plan. If you go to development lending specialists, they will have much less of a requirement for pre-sales. As a matter of fact, they may even have no requirement for pre-sales. And in that instance, you can get on and start constructing straight away. Now you're not selling off the plan, but instead you're selling the finished product at the end. So you're going to get the maximum price. You're not going to incur the holding costs, but you will pay a premium. You will pay a higher interest rate for doing it. Now, of course, the 2 different banks have done the math on these things, and they know that, I guess, the differential between those 2 means that functionally your profitability is going to be pretty much the same no matter which way around you go. So it really then comes down to your risk profile. Do you want to de-risk the project, selling off the plan, knowing that you've got cash in the bank coming at some point in the future? Or do you want to roll the dice and take it to market and try and sell it for the maximum price and expose yourself to any market uplift or downlift that may happen between now and the starting of the project. So that's a risk profile decision that you need to make, Sanath. Anyway, I'm hoping that helps. Next one from Hamad. Hamad says, hi guys, wanted to get a better understanding of the process of site acquisitions. Previous developments undertaken have all been through readily available investment properties and PPOR properties. Am I best off to be in contact with estate agents in target areas for off-market opportunities, buyers agents, or general market opportunities of a mixture of the three, or a mixture of the three? Hamad, very, very good question, mate. But I can tell just from the nature of your question that you are a beginner. Okay. And because of that, I'm going to give you a massive, massive, massive word of warning. If you go to any buyer's agent or any real estate agent, almost guaranteed they're going to tell you that they've got a cracking site with development potential and it's going to make a squillion dollars. Okay. But let me reassure you that 90%, that's 90%, 90% of all development sites out there do not make money. And so you need to be very, very careful that you need to know how to assess that. My guidance, mate, get yourself some education. Come to one of our events. We run these events all the way around the country. I've just given you the link down below. Come to some of our events and start to learn what are the things that you need to look for, some of the things that add issues, challenges, and costs to the project. My humble opinion, mate, is educate yourself first before you actually go out and pull the trigger and buy something that ends up being a dud. I've seen way too many people do that and get hurt, and they get hurt really bad. So please, please, please don't do that. Go and educate yourself. Come to one of our meetups. Not sure where you're located, but this is a good segue to actually wrapping up this recording. We run these events all the way around the country, mate. We run them in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide. We run them both physically and also we live stream them. So it doesn't matter where you are located, but there is an opportunity to turn up to any one of these at any point in time. So, mate, hope you got plenty from that. Hope everyone got plenty from that today. I'm going to say until then, folks, I'll see you at our upcoming meetup. Till then, bye for now.